Hello, my friends in the dental world. It is Wednesday, my favorite night of the week. It's my favorite night of the week because it's Hump Day. And that means it's time for Humpday Happy Hour with dentists in the know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It's live. Tonight, it is over a beautiful red blend, the Federalist. I'm very excited to be having a sip of that. Feel like I've earned it today. Did some restorative dentistry, did some sleep and TMJ. It's just been a great overall day, as I was telling my best friends in the world, Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell. They are my partners in crime in this little thing that we call Dentists in the Know. And as you all may know, we are all dentists, we are all educators, and we are all business owners. And our job is to help bring all of you in the know. Well, guys, we have an incredible guest tonight that I'm so excited about. So I definitely want to get to the news in good time, and I want to give our guests a lot of time. Dr. Paul Henny, who's with the Bob Barkley Study Club, and for all of you who have been a part of Dinks for a while, you know that the Bob Barkley Study Club, they always contribute to the discussions and in such a positive way. And they're always very insightful. And we're just so thankful that they've embraced our group and that they've contributed to our group in the way that they have. So we're going to find out more about this terrific study club tonight. So I'm excited to talk with Paul, and I know you two are as well. But in the meanwhile, JB, do you have some news for us so you can depress us some more?
Always. I always have news because at least in my spare time and when I'm avoiding other things that I should be doing, I don't mind looking at dental news. So always happy to bring it. I think.
So Jeff, let's start with the news. What do you have?
I've got it. Yeah. This just in from our desk over at the Volvo dealership. Yeah.
I don't know why I put up with them like every week, every hour, every day. So it's really interesting that we were talking about tonight, at least for Chad and I, just feeling a little bit of fatigue, some exhaustion. And actually, a study came out not that long ago that 80% of dental professionals are feeling, or actually oral health providers, so put that in a lump sum, are feeling burnout post-COVID. And I will tell you, just in my small circles of friends in organized dentistry, and then in the lecture world, and then on Dinks, and then the colleagues that I am fortunate enough to work with on a daily basis, that there is a fair amount of fatigue amongst those who, particularly who own businesses, but definitely who are continuing to provide medical services post-COVID. And now there are surveys and statistical data to back up the feeling that many of us are having. In fact, I had a future temp employee coming in today, a dentist who sold her practice actually just before COVID. And we were talking about different things. And I just said, COVID just changed. I don't want to say everything, but it changed a lot about how we feel showing up for work every day and what's the world got laying for us waiting that we're going to need to deal with. So I do think that that's probably a pretty realistic statistic. The other piece of that I don't think we talk enough about is the exhaustion that's happening on the team side as well. And in fact, another study that came out of the UK talked about how staff shortages and lack of help is contributing to those individuals who are showing up for work every day aren't getting breaks. They're worried about exhaustion and how that might affect patient care and their attention to detail. So that survey is also showing some interesting statistics about medical professional burnout. And, Jeff and I were talking about this before we got on, as he's negotiating elderly care with both of his parents. and some of the challenges that we're seeing within the medical profession. So I doubt that these statistics are totally unique to oral health providers, but it's an interesting take on, I think, what many of us are feeling with both burnout and our staff feeling somewhat fatigued and grinding it out on a daily basis. Perhaps that is the wake up call, the call out to look for future opportunities and to change the way we're practicing. But in the time being, that is where the many oral health professionals are sitting in the US today. Another interesting story that came out. So we've been talking a lot about workforce on this podcast. We talk a lot about workforce in the news segment. And the most recent study that came out in 2023 for pre-doctoral students when they enter private practice, a huge jump to DSO. In fact, it increased by 20 percentage points. So it looks like more and more doctors that will be graduating from dental school will be considering DSO or corporate dentistry or some type of large group practice in order to pursue their career. That is a pretty big increase year over year of 20%. A PA woman was sentenced to jail for embezzling from a dental practice and a restaurant of $90,000. You know, for many dentists out there, this is a vindication story. We've had employees over the years that have taken advantage of us. Maybe they're just taking a lot of extra things out of the break room. Maybe they're stealing direct cash out of your cash box. But rarely do these individuals really get any form of punishment. This particular woman has pled guilty to the 2 counts of felony theft and will be spending 30 to 66 months in prison. We wish her the best of luck. And lastly, the city of Albany, the state capital of New York, is finally considering fluoridating the city water. Now, I know you might be asking, how is it possible that there are still city municipalities out there without fluoridated water? And I was pretty shocked to read the story myself. But they have legislation forward for review and vote to bring fluoridated water into their municipal water supply. The state of New York and many of the surrounding areas already have it in place. But for whatever reason, the city has failed to adopt this practice. Now, it's obviously interesting that this is coming forward, as I think fluoride is getting a lot of attention, both in the social media outlets and also in the science area about efficacy of fluoride and how we utilize it most effectively for patients while also protecting those individuals from the side effects and health issues related to fluoride. But here's Albany charging forward, going, it's been a long time. Everybody else has had fluoridated water. We want to participate in the process. So we'll keep you posted how they vote. We're all fingers crossed for Albany. They get their fluoridated water. And with that, that's the news.
So for the past couple of years, I've been seeing this Bob Barkley Study Group. So I'm really excited to learn more about it because, as we all know, we are all very involved in various study clubs, and this is something that's very important to us, as education is very important to the dentists that know. But our guest tonight is Dr. Paul Henny, and Dr. Paul is a graduate of the University of Michigan School of Dentistry. He's on faculty, or he has served as faculty at University of Kentucky. And the Pankey Institute, which I was honored to speak at last year. What a great group of people. A co-founder of the Bob Barkley Study Club, which I believe has been in existence for more than 25 years. Runs a health-centered practice in Roanoke, Virginia. And he's also a practice coach. This past week, Dr. Henny sent me his book, Codiscovery, Exploring the Legacy of Robert F. Barkley, D.D.S. And I'll tell you, I had seen the table of contents before I received the book. And I haven't gotten that far into it because it just came this week, but I'm very intrigued the names that are in this book are just so important to all of us as dentists. I mean, we've got Bob Barkley, who I don't know yet, but I'm going to know, I guarantee you, by the end of the night. Doctors Harold Worth, Richard Green, Michael Schuster, William Strupp, Gary Tackix is in there, Gary DeWood, and then of course you got Paul Henny that put it all together. I'm really excited to learn more about this and learn about your journey in dentistry, but it's an honor to have you, Paul. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for allowing me to join you all. I just want to begin by making the statement that my attorney has told me to not talk about my practice in the Holiday Inn down.
Okay.
That's a really good call.
I didn't know that you practiced there, but I knew that at one point in your life, you've probably stayed there and it made you a little smarter.
There you go.
That's right.
Go.
And I had a little misstep earlier. I went and I was about to say Paul Henley, and that's because you remind me of Don Henley.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm telling you, take it as a compliment. You know, Henley, you know.
I'll take that as a compliment.
If you want to sing Hotel California.
It doesn't get much better than that. Doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah. So tell us, start in the beginning and tell us about kind of your journey in dentistry. We'd love to hear about it.
Well, let me begin by just taking an informal poll of the three people that are on the screen other than myself, Jeff, Chad, JB. Do any of you know anything about who Bob Barkley is or was?
I honestly do not.
No, okay. But knew a lot of the names that were mentioned.
Right. So that, in essence, is the intention of this book, is to bring much greater awareness to the legacy of Bob Barkley, which flows through a lot of the things that we all know and use and think about, concepts, the way a lot of us work today, the way a lot of us think, particularly if you're in the Pankey Institute orbit. There's a lot of Barkley in that curriculum, maybe not overtly, but it's there. Bob Barkley was involved in the starting of the Pankey Institute. He was on the board. He donated a lot of money to the organization. But let me back up. Let me just kind of talk about my journey and how I kind of got connected to Bob Barkley, because Bob Barkley actually died before I started practicing. I started practicing in 1984. And as Chad said, I graduated from the University of Michigan. And after I graduated from Michigan, I took a couple of faculty positions at the University of Kentucky Dental School, and simultaneously attempted to start a private practice there. Started out an associateship that was full of insurance. Lexington, Kentucky at that time was loaded with dentists. I was told at one time there was 900 dentists per 1,000 people or some ridiculous ratio. I'm sure it was skewed because the faculty's there in town, but it was virtually impossible to get a private practice started there. It's probably very similar to like a place like Austin, Texas, and a lot of other university towns. So I struggled to get started, and I tried to connect up with people that needed associates and knew something about ways to get myself going in dentistry. My heritage is from dentistry. My father was a dentist. He was an oral surgeon. My uncle was an oral surgeon. My uncle was one of the most famous oral surgeons of all time. Developed a lot of the head and neck surgeries that we do today and know about today, and pioneered and wrote about them and lectured about them, and was the president of the academy and everything back in the 60s and the 70s. And all that was done at Ford Hospital in Detroit, when Detroit was very rich and there was a lot of money there. So I come from a legacy dentistry family. So I had high expectations. And when I got out of school, I was immediately confronted with the fact that my version of reality of what dentistry was in my head and what I was experiencing were very, very different. And I was having a hard time getting started. I was having a hard time really getting people's attention and getting them to be interested in appropriate care. and I was really struggling. And there was a point at which I almost left dentistry. A couple of years in, I became friends with a guy that owned a very nice tabletop retail store, and we opened up a retail store together and a kitchen shop. And if you look behind me here, that's why my kitchen is so well appointed. I'm deep into cooking, high-end cooking and stuff. And we opened up a kitchen shop, and I was making a lot of money. And I thought, this is a lot more fun than practicing dentistry. And things started to slow down, and I looked around, and I met a dentist in town. I was referred to meet a dentist in town that had trained at the Pankey Institute. His name was Bob Barkley, and this was in Lexington, Kentucky. And I went into his practice, and it was totally unlike any dental practice I'd ever seen. The waiting room wasn't crowded with people; just had a handful of people, and everybody was well dressed and well behaved, and he had a staff that was unbelievable, well trained, high delegation. He had 4 operatories, I think 3. He had 3 operatories that he worked out of, and all 3 of them were all set up with Cavo hand pieces. I think he had at least 3 or 4 high speeds. He never changed a burr. He was like into efficiency, motion, everything. And all of his cases were on articulators, and he was doing full mouth cases most of the time, aesthetic cases. He was even doing some implant dentistry back in the 80s. And it blew my mind. I didn't know this thing existed, honestly. So it piqued my interest. And he also let me hang out in his private office, which had a massive bookshelf with all kinds of books on it. And on the bookshelf were books from people like Pete Dawson and people like Jeff Okeson and Omer Reed, Avram King, if you've heard of Avram King, and other people. And I would pick up these books when he was busy working and couldn't talk to me. I would pick up and I would read them, and I would read things and read about these perspectives of dentistry that I never even considered. And one of the things that Avram King would constantly talk about was this guy named Bob Barkley. Who the heck's Bob Barkley? I had no idea. I didn't learn about him in dental school. And that started me on a long journey of trying to figure out who this guy was and why he was so important. So we're talking about, this is roughly around 1988. And Bob Barkley referred me over to another dentist in town. He said, there's somebody else that I think you really need to meet if you're interested in this sort of dentistry. And he said, I want you to go over to meet this orthodontist, pedodontist in town. His name's Walter Doyle. And I said, who's Walter Doyle? He said, well, Walter Doyle is the first double board certified orthodontist, pedodontist, and he did that in the early 60s. And Walter had a practice in Lexington that virtually nobody knew about because he only saw a few patients. And so I went over and he invited me in. And in the waiting room, there's one patient, an early teenager, and he welcomed me, took me around the office, showed me the facility, showed me the treatment room that he was going to see this young girl in. And in the treatment room was a SAM 2 articulator that he had mounted the case. This is a teenager, had mounted the case with an axograph on it. He was doing mid-face development. He was doing condylar growth, all this stuff we're talking about in the mid-80s. And he, a lot of the income that he made was actually related to a teaching facility that he had downstairs in his office. He had a teaching facility where he had 12 people would fly in from all over the country, sometimes internationally, every month, and they would spend 3 days with him. And he would teach them developmental orthodontics. He would teach them the things that we now know, like Jeff is very much into. How do we guide mid-face development or correct deficient mid-face development? How do we improve breathing? How do we create optimal oral health by facilitating better growth or correcting deficiencies? He was doing all of that in the 80s. Of course, I was just a couple of years out of dental school. I had no concept about what I was seeing or the true value of it, but it blew my mind. and it created a perception in my mind that there's much more to dentistry than I ever imagined. So it put me basically on a career-long path of trying to learn more about all of these things. And one of them was learning more about Bob Barkley, who was a pioneer in preventive dentistry. A lot of the preventive dentistry concepts that were developed in dentistry were pioneered by Bob Barkley. Bob Barkley was one of the leaders of using like a phase contrast microscope, for example, in teaching patients that the plaque in their mouth is not just bad brushing crud, it's actually bacteria, and some of it can be pathological. So he was teaching them about the oral microbiome. We're talking about 1970. Okay. So these people were so far ahead of their time, it was hard to really get a grasp of what they were doing. So I spent, over 20 years, 25 years, just researching these things, studying these people, trying to figure out what they were doing, trying to integrating what was still valuable. And the book that you have, Chad, is the culmination of that research. It's about 20 plus years of research and work, a lot of which I've integrated into my practice here in Roanoke. And a lot of it is what I teach. So a lot of it is now taught through the Bob Barkley Study Club. That's the function of the Bob Barkley Study Club, is to propagate these concepts, what I would call health-centered dentistry, whole person dentistry. So that would include both the physical and the biological and the psychological. Okay. So, that's the essence of the book. So the book kind of takes you through that and who's connected to who. And that's why there are various names in there like Bill Strupp and so forth. A lot of these people had either personal contact with Bob Barkley and they influenced their course career, or they were under the teaching of somebody that was in contact with Bob Barkley and that had influenced them. So the point of the book is to kind of open up the window and allow people to see actually what the true legacy of Bob Barkley is. And it's expanding out today as in Jeff's case, in all of your cases where you're looking at patients Chad, you were just talking about seeing a patient and sleep was the driver, dysfunctional sleep, disordered sleep. So, these are things that you all know. These are not things that we were thinking about or talking about 15 years ago, right? But these were things that Walter Doyle and other people were working on and thinking about long before that. And so it's been such a fascinating topic for me to say, it's like Back to the Future. That a lot of this stuff has already been explored and figured out. It's just a matter of bringing it to today and maybe using some of the technology that exists today to help us diagnose things and guide growth and development more predictably and so forth. So that's a very long explanation, but that's what it's about, Chad.
I think it's very interesting, and I love to hear this. I question, listening to what you say, I question what people are going to be talking about in 15, 20, 30 years from now. I mean, where this is going to be. And I hope that more of this is taken into consideration. And I know that it will be, just because of where we're headed right now. I think the tools have always been available before us. We just didn't necessarily know how to use them. That's right. That's my take on it.
Yeah, which kind of leads into the other aspects of the book, which is, as soon as we enter into this arena of complicated problems, growth and development, expansive orthodontics, surgically assisted orthodontics, opening vertical dimensions, all of these things, these are not quick and easy things to do. All of these things are expensive, time consuming, and perhaps most of all, they involve tremendous patient engagement, right? So the patient is not going to get on board with something that's expensive, time consuming, likely to be not fun or comfortable unless they can really see in their mind's eye the value of it long term. That requires a different kind of relationship with each person. So a lot of the book is talking about how to do that, how to engage people in a different kind of way. And this is really one of the big things that Bob Barkley was all about. It was about changing the relationship of the doctor from being the, the authority figure to being a partner. And to be a partner, you've got to be a better teacher. You've got to be a more effective teacher. And you've got to be a more effective leader, essentially. And so that's what in a nutshell, that's what Codiscovery is all about. Is in a nutshell, you can describe Codiscovery as learning with. So you intentionally set up your patient experiences in a way that the patient is learning with you, and you're kind of working with them on how they feel about what they're learning and and very likely for the very first time in their entire life, they're learning about things they've never thought about. They never thought about the priority of keeping their teeth healthy for their entire life. These are discussions they never had with a dentist or anybody else for that matter. It's all, everything's just assumed. And this is the way the mind works. And a lot of the book involves just talking about how the mind works and how we need to be more strategic and effective with working with people if you want to be more effective teachers. So we've got to learn how to be more effective at helping people to learn more about themselves, as well as sift through that and decide what that means to them. I've got all this new information about my current situation, like you're talking about Chad with his patient destroying his front teeth, but that's the sign, right?
Yep.
That's not driving it. That's not the cause, right?
Yeah. And I like the concept of co-discovery because we do that in medicine. Doctors start with testing your blood, bacteria, hormones, all the different data points that they can gather in order to, number one, confirm and imaging to confirm diagnosis and or to justify treatment plans. And but to your point, maybe we had the concepts very early on, but we don't have these easily reproducible testing mechanisms in our practice today to say, yeah, I'm picking up on the fact that we've got XYZ disease processes potentially occurring. If I could just execute these 3 or 4 tests, we could get some data back. And then the patient isn't thinking, oh, the dentist is only motivated by money to be able to perform dental procedures. Right. It's validated and backed by the data. And the other piece that I see with patients quite frequently is like their whole demeanor releases when exactly what you said early on about Barkley was that, it's not just that there's plaque and that there is an inability to remove it. It's what's housed within it. And that patients feel this tremendous amount of guilt, shame, disappointment, or, they've spent their whole life really trying to control the bacterial pathogens, thinking it's just through plaque accumulation. And in fact, there's a whole processes working against them that they somehow think they can control. And I don't know if you see that in your practice, like their shoulders just release.
Absolutely. So the bottom line is this: as dentists, as a group, and I'm talking about as all of us as a profession, we are just terrible at education. And yet effective education is really the only pathway to get where we really want to go. I mean, we all have a desire deep in our heart to be more effective helpers, right? I mean, we want to see our patients become more healthy. We want to see our patients make better decisions. We want to see our patients follow through. We want to see our patients understand more complicated concepts so that they can engage them and maybe make a decision that might take 2 or 3 years to execute and be expensive, but it could have massive implications on the quality of their life going forward. And that requires a completely different kind of relationship with people. And to kind of loop back to what JD was talking about actually in the news, you were talking about burnout and fatigue and staffing shortages. And what I'm saying, if you read this book, is that slow down and become more effective. Learn how to be a better helper, and you won't need as many patients. And that's been my experience in practice as I've learned about these concepts and deployed them, and now I'm teaching them, is that you don't need a lot of patients. What you need are people who are aligned with what you do well and what you visualize as your purpose. Why does this practice exist? And
do you think that, Paul, do you think that the biggest part of the battle is really how dentists are educated, and the messaging in our dental education, our undergraduate dental education, I should say, where really it's most of the focus was put on the technical aspect and providing that technical piece at a level where there's 93, 94% success rates. And that's really what's beaten into the minds of dentists, as opposed to why did the problem get there in the first place,
Right.
and how do we prevent that from happening again? And I feel like that's the piece that most dentists don't recognize, because I hate to use the word indoctrination, but that's really what it is in dental school, where, okay, here are the procedures we do. Here's how you do them really well. Here's how you do them effectively. And don't ever make a mistake when you're doing this procedure, because you're going to fail dental school if you do that. And it was never really about the long-term outcome. It was more or less about
No,
that short-term result.
there's only so much time in a 4-year curriculum. And it's a great topic, Jeff, because this was a topic that Bob Barkley was involved in. I talk about it in the book. Bob Barkley said that, we need to think about maybe selecting different types of people for dental school. Actually, we need to think about people that are more individuals that are more people persons, people that have more of a health-centered mission in their life. That's who they are as a person. And he also worked with a number of dental schools, USC, Loma Linda, Iowa, several others. And he partnered with the dental school, and he reorganized the dental school so that the patients weren't just treated like a commodity so that they could get the boxes checked off so the dentist could get out the door at the earliest possible advantage. He actually created treatment teams between upperclassmen and lowerclassmen, and as people graduated, the patients would be traded off, and they treated the patients as a treatment team. So the person was treated comprehensively from the beginning all the way through, and the patient was handed over to people that understood the greater, longer picture. That's the experience we missed in dental school. I know I did at Michigan, because we were just procedure focused, obviously. And I mean, it's important. Obviously, it's important that we need to be very, very good at procedures, but we also need to develop our philosophy of practice. So that's what's missing in dental school today, is dentists aren't allowed the opportunities to develop a personal philosophy of practice. And then looping back to what JB was talking about in the news, there's a lot of key points here. Most dentists are now entering into DSO situations and corporate situations where they have no opportunity to develop their own philosophy. They have to go by the philosophy of whatever that organization is. So
I absolutely love that. And I just want to say right here, Mark, cut that out, that dentists are not allowed, or dental students are not allowed to create their own philosophy of practice. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Right. No problem.
Such a great comment.
And so we have, my daughter, my oldest daughter is just graduated from college. She's got a degree in education. She's a passionate teacher. She just completely connects with children. And she's just one of these people that have, that X factor. She can just connect with children and teach them really effectively. Well, one of the things that pretty much every teaching program in the country historically has always done is, before a teacher graduates from college and gets their teaching degree, they have to write a philosophy statement about what their teaching philosophy is. Now, we can argue that the same problem exists. They may develop this philosophy in their mind, and then they get plugged into a public school system that has a different philosophy, but at least they're required to think about it and put it on paper and present it. And in my opinion, dentists should do that too. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of me being a dentist? What's the outcome of all of this? It's not just money. It's not just prestige. It's not, being able to be a part of the country club or whatever it is that you want to put on that list. Hopefully the reason that you went in dentistry, and I think most people that I'm around, I think most dentists as a rule are good people, want to be helpers. They just don't know how, or they're stuck in a dysfunctional system. Either they created it, or they bought into it, or they have to work in it, and they don't know how to work their way out of it and create a practice that's more in line with who they are inside. So that's a big part of this book, is talking about those sorts of things and how to do that. Because as we move forward, the marketplace is changing, and all of you know this. It's becoming more and more corporatized, and the opportunities to be an independent practicing dentist, like everybody on this call right now, are diminishing. And so the book is really designed to help people to think about that. And that probably is not going to be something that they can do right out of the gate. I couldn't. Most people can't. You've got to like learn some things, get some bank. So maybe 10 years in, then you're thinking in roughly 10 years, I'm going to prepare myself to launch my practice with my philosophy. And this is what we're going to do. And that's what I did with my practice. I actually literally mapped it out in my Franklin Day Planner, and you're all probably old enough to have had one of those. 10 years before
I still have one.
10 years
story.
10 years before I built the building that I'm in, and many years before all the things that I'm experiencing now. And I literally wrote them out. This is what it's going to be. This is what I want. This is the training I need to do. This is how I want to experience practicing dentistry. So when Jeff was saying I had a great day today, most of my patients were really on board, and everybody was kind of philosophically aligned, and we were just jazzed. That's most of my days, is Jeff's day. Now that didn't happen randomly. That's because I planned it.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point, because if you aren't prepared to lay out your own future and make your own decisions, plenty of people are out there ready to make them for you. And so many dentists fall victim to that very early because they're very focused on the technical accumulation of skill. I definitely fell prey to this very same scenario. You're focused on, I need to be good at doing these technical procedures, without ever truly envisioning what private practice would be like, or what patient population do I want to serve. And in fairness, that does evolve over time.
Absolutely, and it should.
Who I wanted to serve at 35 might be different than where I am today. I know at 36, I've evolved. I'm kidding. It was a joke. Anyway, the point is that it has to be a good plan so that you're in control, at least of where you want your future to go and your philosophy, because again, plenty of people want to control that, but also be flexible enough that you can adapt, over time. And
right. So the reality is these two things need to evolve in tandem.
Okay.
You need all of the clinical skills that I know you have, JB.
Yes, he didn't say that about you guys.
I know these two guys are slackers, but you got more. I think you got more letters at the end of your name than they do. I'll have to check.
No, Jeff has more because of the sleep
Does
stuff.
he? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, some of those sleep credentials are intentionally long, like A, B, F, D, G, Y.
Yeah. There's a lot of extra letters.
And so that they even have to do like a second line on your, scrubs to like fit all that in. Yeah. But anyway, but exactly what JB's saying, these two things should be evolving in tandem. And the most important thing about having a vision for what you want to do, is the revision. Because as your clinical skills develop and your awareness increases, like mine did, my vision evolved. I realized that what I thought I wanted in the beginning wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. As I learned more, things got more comprehensive, things got more sophisticated, and so forth. So, but I guess my central argument is what we were just talking about moments ago, is that we don't get an opportunity for philosophy development. It's not in dental school. There aren't too many people that teach that. And so that's a big part of my book, actually, is talking a little bit about how to write a philosophy statement and why that's so important, and how Bob Barkley did that and why Bob Barkley did that. And so, and we're talking about stuff that happened 50, 60 years ago, but it's still like some of the most important things that we need to be focusing on right now. It's not all about technical dentistry. It's not all about technology. At the end of the day, we're still working on people that have feelings and emotions and priorities and all that stuff. And if you're not connecting into that and communicating that with them in ways that are effective, they're very unlikely to make good decisions. And,
it's interesting. Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Finish.
No,
I was gonna.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, what I was gonna say, you really you've made me think about this, and people as a whole, at no time in any of our careers have people looked for a more holistic approach to their medical care. And that is happening at the same exact time that we're seeing more and more dentists go into the corporate world, where they will never have the ability to be able to provide the holistic care that all these people are really begging for at this point. And so, I've been talking about this pendulum swing that I know is going to happen. And it's going to be because people like you reach out to enough of these dentists to say, you know what, there's this whole community of people that just want to be looked at as a person and want to be looked at as a whole body and not just a mouth or not just a joint or not just an airway or whatever.
Right.
And yet there's a diminishing population of dentists that are available to serve them.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
Let me give you a little story to just kind of drive home that point. I frequently go around and visit various dentists' offices when I do coaching or other things. And when I was in Lexington, Kentucky for a course, I went into a young dentist's office that had been coached by Tom Larkin. I don't know if you're familiar with who Tom Larkin is. Tom Larkin has focused a lot of his attention on the biologic side of dentistry. But this young female dentist had set up her office. She actually had kind of a semi-library in there, library books set up as if you were walking into a library, and the books were on book holders, with the front of the book facing forward. All books on health, whether it would be nutrition or breathing or whatever. And I thought, isn't that cool? I've never done anything like that. So when I came home, I got all the books that I read all the time, and I bet they're in your bedroom, under your bed, or wherever, all this stuff that we read. And I thought, I'm just going to take these to the office and I'm going to buy some book stands. I'm going to put them out. I've got an old school table in my patient reception area, and I put them out there and some other places in the room. So I've got like maybe 10 or so of these books sitting now. They're all on book holders. And immediately, day one, one of them's on sleep apnea, one of them's on ozone, one of them's on omega-6 fatty acids, one of them's on diet, books like Wheat Belly, all that stuff. Breathe. Immediately, the patients in my office would go over, they would pick up the book, and the first conversation that I would have with them when they came back in the hygiene suite was, I read that book, and that was the conversation. It was about health. It cued a conversation about health. So my observation is, and I will readily admit that the demographics of my practice are different than the average insurance center practice, because I do not take assignment. So my patients tend to be more health centered. They tend to value dentistry and dental health more than maybe the average person. But I'm telling you, I was shocked at what people were reading and aware of. You don't know. You would be surprised too. I put that challenge to you guys and everybody that's listening to this. Try that experiment. Get some of those books out of your bedroom closet or wherever you've got them shoved, and bring them to your office and put them out and see what what happens. You'll be amazed. Some conversations will begin that will take people towards health, and the patients will start to see you in a different light. They'll see that your philosophy is about a lot more than just teeth.
All right. So we had a question from one of our viewers tonight, and so I want to put it out there. When you're dealing with underlying health conditions that you can recognize that are undiagnosed, how hard of a battle is it for you to get primary care providers to listen to you?
I think a big part of the success of this type of practice model, which is, you could call whole health, is that you've got to have, a cadre of like-minded thinkers. For instance, I held a workshop here at my house and down at my office. I've got a teaching center in my office. And I think, Chad, are you doing that too now? One of you is.
Jeff is.
Jeff is.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 40 people here at my house.
But not at my house. I don't like.
Yeah. I intend, a couple years ago, I built an addition onto my house with the intention of using it for that purpose.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm in it right now. This kitchen behind me is part of it. We cook together and do all kinds of things together. But I also have a teaching center at my office. Now, all this looping back. The reason I'm doing that is because I met Walter Doyle when I was like 27 years old, and I saw he was teaching people in the basement of his office, and I thought, holy shit, you can do that? You can do that? And so I just want to point out the power of having a vision.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, just 2 weekends ago, there were 40 people here from all over the country. I mean, all over the country. Several from Texas, Minnesota, Arizona, everywhere. And I had people coming in, and they were speaking about the oral microbiome. We were talking about ozone. We were talking about Codiscovery. We were talking about all kinds of things. And you would be surprised at how many dentists are ready for this message. You all just got to step up and deliver it. You got to understand it more and deliver it, because this is like the only salvation for private practice, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Whole health dentistry is the only thing that's going to survive this avalanche of corporatism. So you got to get your game on. But to loop back to your question, JD, you've got to have a cadre of medical professions who are on board with you. And I invited my physicians who support me, my sleep medicine doctor, who's an independent practitioner. He's also certified in sports medicine. And my other physician, who's a whole health physician who is outside of medical insurance, and several other people. My chiropractor that I work with, who's very whole health, they were all there at my workshop.
How do you build that cadre of individuals? If you're in a community, any tips and tricks? I mean, how do you network? Jeff's done kind of the same thing. I think he's had a lot of success at working those relationships.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm old school, but I'll tell you how I do it. I invite them up to my house, and we cook together, and we share wine and food, and we just talk philosophy for hours. And then we get the turntable out, and we start listening to LPs and stuff, Mm-hmm. And then if we get into the wine real deep, then we get the 45s out. Now, I may be pushing it with you guys, but
no.
Nope.
Hey, just send us your address, Bob. We're on our way. We're on our way.
Yeah, we set up the album shelf again in the house.
So that's how you do it. I mean, you set up deeper social connections, because they need to know who you are as a person, and that this is not just your latest strategy to try to find new patients. It's got to be, this is who I am. I need some people to help me develop this. So we cross refer all the time. And so wherever they go, they're getting the same philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, I just was texting back and forth from one of my physician peers, and she's got a patient with a very imbalanced oral microbiome. And I'm telling her, this is what we need to do. We need to do some salivary testing, and we need to get some better diagnostics going to support, why is this happening to this person? So there's something to talk about. You probably don't know this, but somebody has developed and patented a prebiotic that you can take, and if you let it dissolve in your mouth 3 to 4 times a day, you can literally manage out all of the oral pathogens. I'm talking about dental decay, gingivitis, and periodontitis. If you don't believe me, read my book and check on the links. And I'm not feeding you a bunch of crap. It exists. This stuff exists. We know now how to prevent all of the diseases that plague the world, dental diseases are the number one thing. And we have been horrible at stopping it. And we've been horrible at teaching others how to stop it. But the tools exist now. We can do it now. It's just a matter of getting organized and helping people. And you know what happens when you get organized? People gravitate towards you. That's how you build a practice. You know, you're not going to be able to compete against the big corporation that's slamming people and giving free shit away.
Well, Paul, real quickly, because we're actually coming to the end of our show. We're running out of time, and honestly, could talk to you for hours. And maybe we'll come out there and do one of those wine.
Let's get together. I'm going.
Record trips.
I saw his backyard, Jeff. Let's go.
Yeah, you're talking. You're right up my alley here. But and all of us. But what I want to know is, so where is the Bob Barkley Study Club now? Where is it going? What is the vision there, and what do you see coming up?
Well, the Bob Barkley Study Club has evolved a lot over the years. It started with three of us, a guy named M. Johnson Haygood, who's an AACD, accredited AACD guy. So I know JB will appreciate how hard that little wicket is to get through. A guy named Charlie Verapapa, who trained, with Frank Spear early on when Frank was doing the courses in his office. So, and myself, and we all trained at the Pankey Institute as well. So this is all in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when our skill set was really kind of getting built out. And so at that point in time, we created the study club that was primarily focused on what I would call behavioral dentistry, which is how can we connect with people, and how can we be more effective communicators? How can we help people make better decisions? What do we need to do to learn more about that? So we invited all kinds of speakers in to focus on that. People like Mary Osborne, people like Avram King, people like Sandy Roth, if you're old enough to remember Sandy. So we learned like crazy about all that stuff and got to the point where we were all integrating that. We all dropped insurance. We were all slowed down, patient-centered, comprehensive care. And then we started teaching it. And that's where we are now. And so I teach a lot of this stuff now. Johnson Haygood does now. Johnson's on the faculty at the Pankey Institute. And then we bring in other speakers too. But we do 1 or 2 meetings a year. I may do more. If interest rises, I think the book's probably going to build some more interest. But here's the deal. You read that book, and if you're interested, you call me up. You can come on up here in the weekend. We will find some good wine. We will do some serious cooking, bake some bread, and we'll just talk philosophy, and we'll talk about how to do this. And then you can take it out and you can propagate it, because that's centrally the mission of the Bob Barkley Institute, is to help propagate and support independent health-centered dentistry and make sure it stays alive, keep these concepts alive.
I love it.
I love that.
I can't tell you how like on board I am with everything that you've said. I just really appreciate it.
100%. Yeah. Now this, it's always great being with like-minded professionals, and it's always great to see people who have found a way to keep passionate about such a great profession. And I think the future is very bright. I've always been an eternal optimist, but I really say that the reason for that is because there's all this opportunity there. There's fewer of us out there, willing to take that dive, and more patients asking for it.
Absolutely. So, let me pose this question to you. How many other professions can you think of that can operate with the kind of independence that I do every day, that probably you do, Jeff? And I know, Chad, you probably just, you do nothing every day. You just probably read magazines or something.
It's amazing how he's figured you out already.
I wish.
And so, but
kind of true.
No, seriously though, I mean, the medical profession to a large degree has been destroyed. There are a few, pioneers out there that are like taking the arrows. But dentistry is like a wide open lane. I'm not saying
Mhm.
there's a lot, there are going to be a lot of them, but it's what's called tier 3. And I talk about in the book as well, as how the market is fragmenting and what's going to happen as we go forward. These things were all predicted and projected over 50 years ago, 40, 50 years ago. They're just playing out now. It's all very predictable. So the key thing is to understand where you are, what the trend is, what it is you want to do. How do you want to shape your future? What do you want your future to look like? What do you want your future to feel like? Do you want your future to feel like Jeff's day to day? I would say, yeah, that's exactly what I want. I want to leave the office every day feeling like, I was doing the right things at the right time for the right people. Right.
Absolutely.
And if I'm doing
100%.
that, I bet you I'm making pretty good bank.
Yeah.
Let's get you back, Paul. I love this. Thank you so much for everything that you said. I really appreciate it. It was very, very, very welcome.
Appreciate you having me.
Well, thank you so much. Jeff, you want to close this out?
Sure, why not? Well, Paul, again, thank you. Great messaging, very uplifting, I think, compared to those two over there who just brought us down for the last 60 minutes. I'm just glad that there's someone else with a positive outlook. No, in all seriousness, we thank you all for listening. We thank you all for watching, whatever you do. And we thank contributors like Paul Henny and the Bob Barkley Study Club. And this will not be the last time we talk. We will, Chad and I and Jennifer will be out there, and we will share good wine and cook and talk philosophy, because I think this is a message that needs to be propagated. So to all of you out there, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Remember, you can always catch us on podcast. Tell your friends. And from all of us, we hope you have a great night and a great rest of the week. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.